I gotta remove this mic so I can move around. And I gotta start my timer, because y'all, when I start talking, so I already prepped myself. I got 20 minutes to get this in. What's good, family? Okay, that was all right. Y'all tired or not? I said, what's good, family? All right. Thank you. I've been listening a lot today, and it's difficult because I prepare things according to what they send me, and then I get into the space, and I feel like I have other things that I want to say. And a couple of things struck me as particularly important, especially in my line of work as educator, as mentor, as collaborator in youth activism. Because I would say it's their activism, I'm just a co-conspirator or collaborator. I just think about the fact that we even need to have this conversation. The idea that we have built centers and institutions around the toxicity that is all of our lives. That we have to convene in a place to talk about how to survive systems of oppression. I had to take a deep breath several times as I was listening to folks talk, because it strikes me as an elder in the community as problematic that we're helping young people to adapt to what we know is toxic and terrible and harmful and very literally killing us. The host kind of introduced me as a former teacher. I'm actually finishing my last year of teaching. It's a trip, y'all. I've been teaching high school English for 15 years. I know, y'all, it's hard. I look tired, huh? I've been teaching for 15 years, and probably my second or third year of teaching is when I started my nonprofit organization, because I knew that quickly that as a public school educator, I wasn't getting much done. And I started looking for alternatives. I started thinking about what could I do outside of the four walls of this classroom and outside of this institution, because schools are sites of trauma. Schools are very literal sites of trauma for marginalized identities. And I felt like I was helping the system. You know, we all think, oh, I can work from the inside. It was killing me and the students I'm teaching. So I started the Youth Mentoring Action Network. I always tell the story that I did all the cool stuff, like as a researcher, I read all the articles and all the things that you're supposed to do, to start a mentoring program. I was like, okay, what are the steps? What are the best practices? How I put all this stuff together. I came up with a very adult-centric model of mentoring. I thought I was popping. The kids walked in, they're like, nah, this ain't it. This ain't even it. It was academic centered. It was rooted in my middle class values. It was rooted in my values as an educator and as a college graduate. And I neglected to ask young people what they needed. And so I had this program going for 1 year. I was working primarily with Black and brown kids. And I was talking to them about get your grades up, get that 4.0 GPA. We're gonna go to college. I'm gonna help you fill out the applications. And some of them were like, okay, because this is where they were here. This is what they were hearing from home or other spaces. Others of them was like, I'm about to become a YouTuber. I don't know what you talking about. Right? But I realized that I had set a program up for me based on what I thought young people needed. And especially around the academic piece, when I started talking to young people about their grades, I was focusing on fixing them. So I kept saying things like, are you showing up to class on time? Are you behaving appropriately? Are you doing all of your work? And they kept saying, that teacher hates me. I feel unsafe in that class. I don't even like math. They were talking about things like microaggressions, right? But they didn't have that language. We've all heard that. I think if any parent out there has heard, oh, that teacher can't stand me. Am I making it difficult for y'all? I'm sorry. Okay, because I'm going to keep on moving. Y'all don't have to. But they had heard all their lives from adults, just fix you. If you pull your pants up, if you stop wearing that hoodie and looking like a thug, mentoring programs, doing this whole tie-to-tie thing, right? We kept focusing on them, fixing them, their individual selves, instead of looking at an entire system of racial and institutional oppression that was keeping them from being their best selves. So that first year, I had to start listening to young people. When they said, this ain't popping, I listened. And then I heard them say, really what we need is just someone to have our back, someone to support us, someone to listen to us. We need people who will stop dismissing us when we say these are the experiences that we're having in this school and in these classrooms. We need someone who's going to hold space for us. Now, all the mentoring research I had read, I don't know how many of y'all have read mentoring research, but that wasn't in it. So I had to go back to square one. And then I had to start thinking about what does it mean to build alongside young people a program that serves young people? Because adults get in a space and we talk a whole lot of game and then we go show up to young people and again, young people are like, this ain't it. But they were not at the table. We're talking a lot today about inclusion. Young folks aren't at the table. And young folks were the ones who were bringing up these issues of race, gender, class, sexuality, ability. Because again, I was focused on their individual needs, right? On them fixing themselves. I wasn't thinking about a system that they were coming up against to be who they wanted to be, to express themselves in the way they wanted to express themselves. And I'm thinking in particular about two quotes. One is a proverb that the child who is rejected by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. I know that's not verbatim, right? I think the word is embrace. The child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. And I think about Susan Taylor in almost every sort of keynote she gives, she says, the village is on fire. The village is on fire. As elders in this space, are we taking care of the young people who are coming after us? Are we fighting enough in these spaces to ensure that we don't have to keep having conferences like this one? Because I know what I'm hearing from the young people that I'm working with is that they're tired of surviving. Right, and I'm listening very intently to my sister, Dr. Bettina Love, right now, who is saying we want to do more than survive. We got to start burning stuff down. Sorry. Some of y'all mad already. But these institutions can't survive and keep doing the harm that they're doing to the folks they're doing it to. And by telling our young people that they need to survive it, we're aiding and abetting. Young people need tools to help dismantle and deconstruct and rebuild and reclaim. And the elders in the community, we have experience being beat up and we have experience rebuilding as well. Their work is not going to look like our work. They're going to take it, they're going to remix it, and do their thing. But as elders, we have something to provide and to give. We have a starting point, a foundation of wisdom that we can provide these young people that they can build on. That intergenerational work is essential and important. Let me check my time. Okay, good. I'm good. I can keep talking. But I think for me, that's the message that I came here to deliver. Most of the time when I'm talking about mentoring, I'm not talking to young people. Because young people have mostly got it figured out. They're looking at us like we're crazy. And we are. Because we have adapted. Right? We've learned to navigate through this toxicity. It's normal for us now. So a lot of the advice that we're giving to young people is this advice of, oh, I did it, you can do it too. Just keep your head down, keep publishing, et cetera, et cetera. We're just giving them this typical sort of advice that's telling them to adapt and not change anything. Just be quiet and get your tenure. Once you get your tenure, right, then you'll just be used to doing their work and you'll keep on doing it, but we don't tell them that. I'm talking to the adults, I'm talking to the elders in this space who need to understand that maybe we are not going to be the ones to dismantle these spaces because we got bills to pay. Let's just keep it real. But these young folks coming behind us are finding new opportunities in new ways. How are we supporting them? What are we providing to them in the way of elderly wisdom? How are we holding space to support these ideas that they have? How are we making sure that they continue to have joy? Where's the space for laughter? Where's the space that they can come into and unload and unburden themselves? We're talking about mental health. All of those things are important parts of what we need to survive this space. And then build on that survival on our way to thriving. We've got to be, I think Angela Davis says, young people should see further, be able to see further than us because they're standing on our shoulders. We have to be comfortable with that. We have to become more comfortable with that. And we have to do some self-reflection to say, how am I showing up for these young people? And am I doing it in a way that maintains the status quo? Or am I giving them information that they need to move forward and to build something anew? I need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because I kept telling young people to be comfortable. I just wanted them to be comfortable like me. Right? And then I realized how sick I was. When we look in the mirror, that's not something we want to acknowledge or something we want to see. But that's the truth. Going to jobs we don't like, working with folks we don't like, dealing with stuff we should not be dealing with, letting a lot of things go, letting a lot of folks say things that you want to check them for saying, but when we say Jesus, not Jesus, be offense. We have all these sort of unhealthy coping mechanisms, and then we get into spaces with young people and we say, your mental health is important. Your mental health is important. And how you gonna show up for a young person when you ain't right? When you are as embedded in this toxicity, embedded in the toxicity that they're having to confront. And we are mad when young people say, I don't want to go to college. Yo, we mad. Think about it. Are you crazy? How many PhDs do I have in this space? How many of y'all will go through that stress and drama again? I saw most of the hands go down. I mean, earning a PhD is a very rewarding thing, right? And if we're doing the work that we want to do, it's a beautiful thing as well. But we also know that that was one hell of a process. Long nights, disconnected from family. They always tell you what, don't get married during a PhD, all of these different things, right? We had everything was on hold, and we were dealing with folks who had power to tell us who we could be and who we couldn't be in the academy. And we're asking young people to follow that same roadmap. We're mad when they see Facebook or Google or Instagram as a more viable option. Those folks ain't even requiring degrees. They say, we don't even care if you have an undergraduate degree. Come code. And we're mad at young people that they don't want to go through this process. We can't be mad at them. We have to shift the process. We have to change the space. We have to welcome them. I was in Ghana this past summer, and I got a chance to visit Dr. Cynthia B. Dillard's international school. When I tell y'all, I wish I had seen what a school was supposed to look like earlier on in my career. Those young Black folks were so free in their space, so full of joy in their space. There was music in their space. There was movement in their space. There were elders in their space. Not just teachers. Now, we got all these gates. We got to keep teachers and security and personnel in schools, right? Got to keep the community out. This space was for everyone. Grandma, great-grandma could come through, check what was going on. Imagine if there was a space that affirming and communal for folks of color when we know that's how we operate. What if these institutions looked like that? How beautiful a concept is that? How proud would we be? How proud would our young people be leaving institutions that mirrored that kind of communal educational spirit? Places where they could truly be free, where they could truly be Black, they could truly be brown. We have to start dismantling and reimagining. Now I'm getting out of time. So I got a video that I wanted to show you guys that really illustrates what this work can look like with young people. So at the Youth Mentoring Action Network, which is all about leveraging mentoring in the fight for equity and justice, we work with marginalized youth populations, not just as mentors, I would say as elders, right? To establish spaces for joy and self-care and for intergenerational dialogue. And right now we are working on a Black Girls Empower initiative in our community. We brought in a Black woman, a marriage and family therapist, to do a self-care workshop with Black girls. And I want to show you guys what that process looked like. Can I share that with y'all?
Yes.
We're all about mentoring in the fight for equity and justice. So the work we do with young people is all about collaborating alongside young people to ensure that you have voice, power, and choice. We help you organize. We provide programs like this that help you engage in health and wellness and self-care. We do college application access or college access in general.
If you've been a part of Iman, you've seen the work that they've done. We're trying to give Black girls the opportunities to create their own efficient solutions to these problems.
I'm gonna lead you in a very brief breathing exercise. So I'm gonna ask all of you to trust me. That's number one. But right now is the time for you to just tune in and focus on your own breath. Take a minute to know how your body feels as you're breathing. It's just a reminder in our day that we can stop and pay attention to ourselves, listen to our bodies, and make sure that we're okay. So I would really encourage you guys to do that. Again, y'all can utilize an app, or you can just sit, breathe, and be still.
My name is Wendy Whitmore. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I have a private practice literally like up the street and around the corner. I have been practicing therapy for about 15 years. I wanted to come up with something phenomenal for y'all. What we see in the mirror is usually reflected by what is being poured into us. So I'm gonna have each of you come up, grab a mirror, you can choose your color, and grab a bucket. When's the last time you literally just took a look at yourself? And what we normally see is the stuff that we hate about ourselves. What I pour in, what I allow to be poured into me, toxicity, emotions, connections, and being selfish. We don't have anything to give anybody else later. Okay? So the first thing that I want you guys to pour into your bucket is, everybody pick up the steel wool. What is steel wool meant to do? It's meant to strip away. What's the texture? It's rough, it's coarse, it's hard. It's all the things that have been said to you that have made you feel rough, hard, unlovable, undesired, and unworthy. Drop it in the bucket. Who are some of the people that light the way for you? Because if there is no us, what else is there? Make them rain, make them rain. Fill your bucket up. Fill it up, fill it up. Repeat after me. I am because I am.
I am because I am.
And beauty is what I am.
And beauty is what I am.
Thank you, ladies.
So we usually do our first place. We have a pair of Jordans. Andres is gonna show them to everyone. Ooh, ah. All right, so drum roll, ready? All right. And our first place is Kyra Perry.
For me, that's what affirming, culturally sustaining spaces look like for folks of color. And none of that is hard to do. None of it. And Michigan got, what the kids say, hella resources. So I know y'all can create these kinds of spaces here. It's time for us as elders in the community to step up and do this work in the way that we know it needs to be done. And I will reiterate again, so that we don't have to continue to hold space to tell our young people how to survive. Young people deserve the best of us so that they can be better than us. Thank you for having me today.
Welcome to you all. Thank you for being here to talk about these issues of what does it mean, as was shared earlier, to work with and hold space with these students who we're hoping to do more than survive, but actually thrive. What does it mean to intergenerationally work with them as they imagine things that we may never have allowed ourselves to imagine? And what is the cost for that kind of activism, that commitment to change, for someone who's in those years where they need all the support that they can be given? Simple. We've got 45 minutes. Okay. So I'm going to begin with a very simple question. And if you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves and your reactions or answers to this question, how do you conceptualize activism? What's your thoughts on what activism can represent when working with either young people of adolescent age or college age students, traditional or non? And because I know Mike the longest, I'll look at him first. You know. Got it.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we were given the questions ahead of time, so I did take some notes, which is helpful for me. Activism. So I'll sort of go off my notes here and see if we can go, but what I have here is working for a better society, not just a society where there's a new power in control, but a beloved community rooted in nonviolence, and a term that has come up recently, which is called kapu aloha. If any of you have been following some of the trials and tribulations on the big island of Hawaii, there's a group of Native Hawaiian activists who are trying to stop the building of a telescope there. And they've been committed to this idea of kapu aloha, which is the beloved, sacred love. You know, and I think that for me, activism is a radical act of courage, because making change within the context that's rooted in white supremacy is quite radical. It's about as radical as you can get. And in fact, I had a student who was a trans Puerto Rican student who confronted me about my course, which I teach on nonviolence and nonviolent communication, and said, you know, I don't know if I can do this because my people are dying. And I feel like being in this institution, doing the things that you're talking about, is not going to prevent my people from dying. And what I told this individual is that you being here, just being here, is a radical act. We together helped to have the chosen name option at the University of Michigan. We also had gender-neutral bathroom put into the university, to our building. And this was almost 15 years ago, So that's what activism means to me.
So I agree with much of what you said. I think existing is definitely part of being a radical activist. I think also having joy, just unspeakable joy in the face of oppression, is also very radical. I mean, sometimes we kind of gear ourselves up to always continually be in a fight and not recognizing that living our full lives the best we can with passion and joy and love is radical as well, right? And so I think just also being sort of rooted in that idea of radical self-care and being okay with having a life and not always needing to fight is as radical as being in the streets.
I'd like to say ditto, but I don't think that's going to suffice. But just adding to some of the things that you said, I really like this idea of activism as being individual and collective action that's designed to educate and disrupt and dismantle any forms of racial injustice and moving forward to creating a more equitable, just, and fair society. So when I just at the basic level. But then if I were to break that down and think about the way that activism looks like when I observe students or in my own life and the purpose, I think about a couple of processes. One is, I think it's really important to name the issue. There's some power in naming. I do a lot of research on racism, to name that the problem is racism, or the problem is this, sexism, or heterosexism, or whatever the problem. So to name it is a form of activism, to educate others about what the issue is, because what I find is that we are immersed in it, and we know how to humanize ourselves. But other people dehumanize us without even being aware of it. And so, unfortunately, we find ourselves in the process of educating others about why these are forms of oppression and why this matters, why this act matters. And because we've all been socialized in a white supremacist society, many times we have to educate people who look like us or who share similar identities to us. The other thing is that I think that are important too is to mobilize people, that we can have this notion, we can name it, but we need to have other people be part of our team. And what does it mean to be mobilized? And so I think you did a great job of mobilizing in terms of getting and listening to the youth. What do they define as important? What are the solutions that they have? So this mobilization is not just important for us to get support, but it's for us to name the problem and to identify possibilities so that we're not working in isolation. And then drawing on our cultural strengths, one of the things, Torie, I really loved and resonated with what you were talking about is the importance of elders in our community. Many times there is this divide between younger generations and older generation, and I think we're all at fault for what creates this friction. And a piece of that is older people want to tell the younger folks what to do, as opposed to listen to the folks' experience. And then younger folks want to say, we know everything, and not listen. So I think providing tools for these intergenerational discussions and dialogues. But having an older person in the room to guide them is so important, and it's culturally congruent with many of our societies. So I think all of that should be a piece of activism.
Hi everybody, buenas tardes. My name is Laura and I come from a family of immigrants and I'm an immigrant myself. So a lot of my work comes from that experience and through that lens, but also the work that I currently do at the University of Maryland is also working with undocumented students. So this question is something that we've had a conversation on over the last 3 years that I've been in my role, but also just in my life, and I think at the root of my conversation is always comes down to activism centering the folks that are directly affected. And a lot of times I hear from students saying, or forgetting to mention that they themselves are centered and that they themselves are directly affected. And so really putting back into context that their humanity matters and that they are that center is really important in the work that I've been doing. And what I've been hearing too from students is that they feel so much pressure to be mobilizing, to be outside. And so I really resonated with what you all mentioned, that they also, it's important for them to find that space to reconnect with family, reconnect to the community, reconnect to whatever that might mean for them, because as displaced peoples, as immigrants, it's kind of part of that intergenerational trauma that also exists that they need to really look to and connect with and explore. And I think another big thing that I hear from folks is productivity, this notion of I have to do this or I have to organize for my community because my parents' sacrifices or all of these things, right, that have led up to this moment. So it's important to also challenge that notion of capitalism and white supremacy, that this productivity, that you have to do it in this way. So that's how we've been working on activism.
Thank you all. Before we move to the second question, I want to probe a little further for anyone who'd like to answer. We don't have to go down the line unless everyone would like to respond. So thinking about your conceptualization of, can you all hear me? Yeah. Okay. Thinking of your conceptualization of activism, what do you think about students of color, young people of color's role in activism and their mental health and well-being?
I think one of the things that I've seen and their role that has been really important to see has been that their role has been taking care of each other. And so I see more folks asking now, did you, to their peers, did you have something to eat today? Did you have a moment that made you smile today? So a lot of things that lead up to how they're doing in that day, but then also how that leads up to the work is things that I feel like students are being more aware of, and a lot of them are starting to acknowledge how important their mental well-being is.
I think also, too, just the reminder that the history of activism has always been youth-centric, because, as I mentioned earlier, us as adults, we have capitalist ties, and so it's traditionally, historically been harder for us to sort of walk off the job or protest when folks in power, are in charge of our monetary, well-being. And so young people have kind of almost always been at the center of activism. And I think, for me, my role has been in reminding them of that, right? That you're not the first, that you actually, are in a long tradition of young people who have paved the way for us, so that they can see their own power and recognize that they're coming after sort of a line of greats.
I also, in addition to what has already been said, I look at this activism as part of being civic engagement, moving and fighting and participating, pushing for democracy. And I think that people of color have always been on the forefront of pushing for democracy in the United States. And as you said, youth have been in the forefront of that. So I see this notion of activism for youth of color as being a developmental milestone, learning about this. So I think that's critical. The other that I'm happy maybe later on we can unpack, you also asked what impact does this have on the mental health? And I think this is an incredibly complex question because I think it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, activism can promote health. And I'm looking at that broadly, so it can help promote individual health and well-being in terms of increased sense of efficacy, connection and belonging, and it can promote community health in terms of thinking about making actually changes within one's environment that can promote a healthy living for others. But the flip side of that is this idea that activism, especially among people of color, can play an incredible toll because you're on the front lines, your ideas are being invalidated. You might suffer retaliation. And so I really see it's our role as adults to be able to promote the health of student activists, whether it's just at the basic level, giving them nutritious stuff to eat, bringing them away, providing them space for joy, or whether it's even a little bit more complex, working with the organization systems themselves, because many times if you're an activist, you're working with activist groups that don't value self-care, and then that can also play a role. So I think it's complex, but.
We'll absolutely return to those things around what are the dualities of activism and what it contributes to the psychological, emotional well-being for young people. But you mentioned development, so let's go there next. So we know, or we have theories about what we anticipate are the developmental stages that students might go through while they're in college, particularly around their social identity, their racial identity. How do you think that that has an impact on both their well-being, but then also the role of activism? What should we be thinking about in terms of introducing young people or encouraging young people to participate in activism as they're moving through those stages of development?
So, one of the things I think that not only comes along with the developmental stages, but it's also context, I think that people don't go through developmental stages at the same rate, and it's not necessarily at a certain age if you hit a certain point. A lot of it is context as well. I mean, for myself, when I was a college student, I'm going to age myself right now, but we built shanty towns on the, lawn. Yeah, they were on the president's lawn, and camped out there for a couple of weeks until finally, we were able to present to the Board of Regents our divestment plan, and was accepted, and that was a great victory. But I knew what was right and wrong at the time, but I did not really understand how the oppression of people in South Africa was tied to my own oppression as well. I think it wasn't until I left Hawaii and went to the University of Texas that I really learned what racism was in this world, and saw the connections between my own experience and the experience of others. Now, our histories are different, but they're rooted in the same system. And I think it wasn't really until a graduate student that I really understood what I was doing. And so then, propelling myself further into leadership roles and putting myself in a position to actually not only be able to protest, but to understand why I'm protesting, and to garner support from other allies to do so. And so I think it's critical. I mean, development is critical, but we all develop at a different rate, and understand that we come from different places and different starts in life.
Anyone else like to respond to that?
One of the things that I've noticed is that in terms of development, a lot of times students are still engaging in this conversation about authority and enforcement, especially around immigration issues, but also just in general. Who am I speaking to? What do I lose? What do I gain if I'm speaking to, or if I push this enforcement, whether it's a parent or whether it's enforcement like immigration customs enforcement, right? And I think a lot of the times it's a conversation about understanding the historical aspect and going back to the context, because a lot of times there's a lot of internalized understanding of, for example, students might say, I'm here and I'm undocumented because it's my parents' fault, without having had the chance to understand what led to the current situation and all of the policies and laws right beforehand. So when I think about development, I think about the internalized trauma and historical things that they don't know that actually helps a lot with their development and understanding, and getting rid of some of these things that they've kind of believed for all of these years and all of this guilt that they carry with them.
What I also think about development, I'm a Black Studies scholar as well and a psychologist, and I'm reminded of the early work of Bill Cross, who looked at racial identity. And his initial call was to Black Studies in 1971, looking at the Negrescence model, was to Black Studies scholars to push for self-actualization among Black students. And what that really meant was that we should help develop a sense of racial pride so that folks can have further commitment to improving their communities. So the first part of the think development is mental liberation, and learning your history and having the tools to understand capitalism and racism and how that impacts us is a developmental process that's related to our informed activism. So mental liberation, and then connecting that to this responsibility that we have to contribute to justice.
Similar to these individual notions of identity development, racial identity development, I think on our campus at least, we see this progression of student activism that might go between what we might call rebellion and protest, to advocacy, to coalition building. Finally, maybe. And not in a linear way, but a progression of willingness to participate in different forms of activism. What do you see as being important about that in terms of how students get that sense of agency, that sense of belonging, that sense of freedom? Where would you position that? And how can we help them go through those realizations, different ways of being activists?
Well, the first thing I think of is this paper that I wrote with someone you all know, David Williams, quite a while back when I first got here, when I first came to Michigan. By the way, I was here for 22 years, so that's why I think I'm here. I'm at the University of Washington now, but I've just been there a year, so my frame of reference is Michigan. Probably will always be. I'm pretty much go blue all the way, so. Yeah, so you know, this paper that we wrote looked at that stages of development and self-reported health, and one of the things we found was that actually the more people were in that militant stage, the worse that they felt their self-reported health was, but then came back down once they reached that self-actualization stage. So this process is non-linear, you know, it actually progresses up and potentially actually comes down in terms of self-reported health, and I would say that's probably very closely related to mental health as well. So I think it certainly matters.
Any other reactions?
I guess I've just been thinking about, I think allowing people to choose what activism means for them. Just because I think, you know, sometimes we sort of define it in this linear way, and, you know, if you're not doing this, then you're not an activist, right? And then today there's a lot of discussion about, oh, you're just a hashtag activist, you're not a real activist. And so when you kind of listed those different levels, I was just thinking about, you know, all of the ways, and we talked about this earlier on the panel, all of the ways that, you know, just our existence is activism. And so I think as a community, as a beloved community, right, just being nurturing and being accepting and affirming with what ways people choose to engage when, because we don't all have the capacity to do all of the things, but we know we need all of the things to make change. Right? And so just being okay with supporting folks in the role that they want to play, or what line, or how they want to follow that line. I think for me, it's just a lot about, I think I was just processing this idea of choice and being affirming with where folks decide they want to be involved.
I think going off of that, some of the students that I work with had done a lot of advocacy over the last 5 years to make my current role as an undocumented student program coordinator a reality. And so when I first came into the role 2.5 years ago, a lot of those students were very much having conversations about, I want to take a step back. I'm in this place where I don't want to, be visible anymore. I don't want to put in all of this work. I feel very tokenized, exploited, all of these things. And so a lot of the conversations with them have been like, it is about fluidity and having them make the choice of how engaged they want to be. But then in the response to that, the institution was very used to having them be a part of panels, be a part of these spaces where they were asked to relive their trauma over and over again, and again at an institution that was part of that trauma. So I think that's very important to continue the conversation.
Thank you. Let's pivot on that point and move the conversation to talking about climate. So we know our students, whether they're on this campus or the schools that you mentioned, and that was poignant the way you described it, places where there's trauma, right? What do we do for our students of color who are experiencing these places where their dreams are supposed to be unveiled and they're supposed to be catapulted into their futures? Are these places where they're either experiencing trauma for the first time, reliving trauma, being asked to share their trauma with other people? What response do we have to them?
I think that question hits me in my gut, so I'll try. I'll take a stab at it. First of all, I would say I don't think that there's a definite answer to that question. I mean, I think we all, again, as elders, teachers, mentors, professors, et cetera, kind of have to be in that moment and in that space and try to react as humanly as possible. But just one of the stories I was sharing earlier was about, I was teaching AP classes, teaching AP English to high school juniors. And I teach at a fairly diverse school, and because I'm one of the only Black AP English teachers, a lot of Black and brown folks would come into my AP class. And the news broke out about the college admissions scandal. And it was a moment in all of my AP classes where I had to just tell the truth, and I had to just, not that I was bad at telling the truth before, but it was just one of those moments. It was like a come to Jesus moment with young people, because you could see, especially the Black and brown kids, the kids who are low income, who are walking in, this is on Twitter and all of these other places, and they're like, I've been working so hard. I've been taking 5 AP classes at a time. I'm paying $85 a test for the AP test. I'm taking the SAT 3 times. I'm spending my Saturdays doing SAT prep, and then folks are just buying their way into school. And they were deflated, right? And these are kids that I'm watching suffer anxiety and, just all of this work being detrimental to their mental health, with this promise of, I'm gonna go to this better place. Or I'm even gonna have access to this better place, right? So for me, I just keep thinking about, again, this is why I talk a lot about systems. I keep thinking about how we're setting young people up for a sort of failure, right? By saying that if they do these things, some magical thing is gonna happen. And there's been recent research about the fact that we're teaching our young people that meritocracy exists, and how deflating that is for them when what they see isn't matching up to the sort of narrative we've been telling them all of their lives, right? So for me, it comes back to sort of holding space and being honest, right? Because I think we want to believe in this notion that if they work hard, they'll be okay. But I think, especially, with teenagers, I found that it's okay to tell them it may not be okay. You may not get into the college that you want. All of this work may still keep you from getting that scholarship, but you're gonna still live. And so what will that look like for you, right? And what are some alternative ways to navigate? And for me as a teacher in those AP classes, it was talking about, not just thinking about name brand schools, right? Thinking about other higher education options, right? Thinking about, depending on levels of privilege, a gap year and what that meant, right? Thinking about the 2-year community college route, right? So just helping them see what the possibilities are, and being brutally honest with them about, what the system looks like.
For the undocumented students that I work with I'm kind of like in the middle, and then on the other side of that, where we know that because they don't have a work permit or their state doesn't allow them to get a license in whatever profession they're getting, we already know that they're not going to be able to get all these things that we've been talking about, promises and stuff like that, right? So a lot of the things that have been helpful have been exploring with them what those transferable skills are, because a lot of them also don't have the option to get an internship or a fellowship because they need a work permit or they need a background check or they need all of these other things that they don't have access to. Or they're being banned from. And so we're thinking about like, what are the funds of knowledge? When you say you take care of your siblings, what does that mean? You're good at time, you're good at managing responsibilities. So we really talk about like, what are the funds of knowledge that you have and that you bring, and how can these experiences translate to these experiences that you want to build your career in the future? And a lot of things are about going back to historical context and being and sharing how creative we have been. And like their own historical background, but like currently I also like to show features of immigrant folks who have done anything in the immigrant rights movement, whether it was through art or they do, there's a couple of folks who do work around mental health, and it's called like undocu healing. So there's a lot of different types of work that I like to share with them, but I also connect them with folks who are not in organizing spaces anymore to share what that experience looks like for them and how they themselves feel like they've contributed, are contributing even now, even though they're not in the quote-unquote organizing or activist spaces. And that's been really helpful for them to own their own identity and own that they have a place in this work that doesn't have to look like anything that they've seen already.
So when I think about this, I think there's some larger, more macro system level things that we can do, all the way to individual types of interventions that we can have. So many of us who work in academia are in positions of power that we can push, and we need to push to speak and advocate on the behalf of students of color, even though it might be painful or difficult for us. That's our responsibility. Someone has done that for us, so making sure that we have representation, getting on those university-wide committees to push for that. And so I think that's hiring other faculty of color that just aren't people of color, but are people of color that are committed to mentoring and social justice. And so I think those are the structural kinds of things. Then I like this idea about healing and holding space, but I also think, which is powerful, when you were talking, Torie, earlier about going to Ghana, going to Africa, I don't think, well, this is for Black students. I can't speak for other students of color, but for Black students, the power of going to the continent is transformative. So I know I've created some opportunities for students, particularly to go to Tanzania, and each year they keep wanting, like this last year was just about a month, and I'm like, okay, that's a little long, but in terms of creating these opportunities for Black students to go back to Africa, to experience that, I don't think we do enough of that, and we need to support those types of things, and that can be healing and transformative. Then even more to the more individual kind of interpersonal stuff, I think what we teach and how we teach, centering student of color voices, decolonizing our curriculum can be incredibly empowering. How we mentor students are really important. Do you adopt a student-centered perspective? You're not their therapist, but you can look at them as a total person. For those of us who have research labs, are you working with your students that incorporate healing into the lab space itself? I mean, there's all kind. Are you providing space for them to understand and unpack what their experiences are like? So there's a range of ways in which we can respond, as at least those of us who are faculty.
I'll just add one little thing. I love the idea of dismantling institutions, and I think I've typically used the term decolonizing institutions, and I think we also have to think of options not just within the current system of education, but what systems can we create outside of those systems? For example, in the community of Waimanalo, where I work, they've created a Ke Kula Nui Waimanalo, which is a higher education institution in Waimanalo, where we teach Native Hawaiian people, whoever wants to come. Courses are taught by community members to be community practitioners, to be practitioners in the community. They learn about indigenous ways of knowing, indigenous knowledge systems. We learn about things like plant-based medicine, we learn how to make instruments. I mean, there's just a whole, range of things that are done. There's a group of people who are forming a global indigenous university, and will run it in a way that, centers indigenous knowledge. And I think for us, we just have to kind of think about what is valid knowledge, and for some of our communities, they will never step foot in this institution, except maybe for something else, and if they don't, then somehow we judge them and we put value on that of not being college educated, but the knowledge that they can still obtain is so valuable, and in fact, I will say superior to much of what is taught in this institution.
That deserved an applause.
Wow.
I think our setup remarks alluded to this notion of if we recognize that many of these campuses that we're encouraging our students to become part of are somewhere between hostile and uninviting, at best, uninviting. What is our response? We can do something to transform the institutions that we're a part of, or think about creating other institutions. I love that. So, for sake of time, let's move a little further into the questions that were prepared for us, and I'll ask this question. Students of color exist in ecosystems of trauma. I think we've all talked about that a little bit. How can students make sense of their ancestors and their families' trauma? This intergenerational sense of trauma, or legacies of trauma, and their current experience on campus. We often hear our students talk about this sense of survivor remorse, or betraying their community, or losing touch. What can we do to mitigate some of that? Or should we? I should start there. Should we mitigate some of that?
Just to start off, I think a lot of times I find myself sharing with students if trauma is passed on, so is resilience. And I think a lot of times the conversation starts there, like what is resilience to you? How do you define it? How have you seen it? How do you feel you embody it? And I think I just want to start there because I feel like that conversation has always led to different ways with students.
I mean, reconceptualizing trauma as survival, and looking at it as a form of resilience as well. Intergenerationally, those connections are very easily made, and I think being explicit about that, I think a lot of the work that I'm doing now, I do for my ancestors, and that's what reminds me, for what I'm doing. I think a lot of the trauma and the intergenerational trauma, especially for people who have assimilated and have been able to get into higher education and to be successful in this system, a lot of times there's that guilt of, I don't really know my history, I've lost my language, and they blame themselves for this, and that's actually not their fault. Our languages were, in many ways, taken from us, or we were taken from our language, or it was outlawed, or it was told to us that if we speak our language, we will be eating a bar of soap. So, these are the kinds of traumas that our ancestors endured. In order for us to assimilate well enough, my father always told me, he said, forget the past, pray to God, and do your best, and when you're raised in that, it's not good or bad. I'm not going to put any value on that. It is what it is, it is what it is, and he taught me that lesson to survive. He didn't teach me that lesson so that I could forget necessarily, but he thought he knew what was best for me to survive, and I did. you know? But it's my responsibility now to change that narrative.
Anyone else like to respond to that question?
I'm reminded, I use a quote from James Baldwin, I am not the object of missionary charity, I am one of the people who built the country. And so just, I know for me, it looks like, you know, reframing a lot of what we think is failure. Because a lot of us, you know, again, you said survival's guilt, who have sort of made it, we look back and we kind of have softer language now, oh, our parents didn't have access, et cetera. But just kind of shifting the paradigm around the idea that there was any kind of a lack in the first place. And you said it, that, you know, these things have been stripped away from us. It was not a fault or failure of our families or of our history, that that really we are testaments, right? We are testaments of how strong our folks have been, that we still exist, right? And I say that all the time, and we talk about resilience, but, you know, folks of color, queer folks, folks with disabilities, that's, you know, as Kendrick Lamar says, that's in our DNA, right? I mean, we've been doing this. So I think just reframing it sometime to help us understand that all of the things, I mean, white supremacy, just that term, the fact that we exist still and have survived, and some of us have thrived, is something to celebrate, right? And so just reframing that a little bit.
Let's see, the only thing that I want to add is to kind of highlight one of the threads that I heard, but it's going to focus on storytelling. I'm really drawn to that. And I do think that there's research that supports this, but we don't do enough intergenerational storytelling, but really to encourage students to go and interview their parents and grandparents and aunties and uncles. And just like, can you tell me a story? Tell me your story, and sit and listen. And that can improve their level of relationship. It can improve their empathy for what their parents or elders have gone through, but also woven in that will be stories of resistance, stories of, you know, survival. And that, to me, I think that can be empowering and helping folks know they come from a long line of folks who have survived worse than many of the things that they're encountering now, and who have worked to transform that. But even if it's everyday acts of resistance, I think that's really important.
Wow, fantastic. I'm learning a lot. We'll move to the last two questions, and I want to reverse the order of these questions a little bit. What advice would you share with a young person, with a student, either on a predominantly white institution's campus, in a high school, in a community-based organization? What advice would you share with a young person about their agency, about their activism, and how they might thrive and maintain themselves and be healthy and experience that joy?
I would say continue to explore what activism, advocacy, community organizing, however folks are framing it in their experience means to them and what that looks like. Because I think a lot of times on college campuses, when you see something happen, certain groups or students respond in a way which could be a rally or it could be a vigil or whatever that looks like. And I think a lot of times students feel like they have to respond in the same way, even though it's detrimental to their health or their well-being. So I would encourage folks to really ask themselves, what does that really mean for you? What does that look like? And how does that feel? When you are a part of these spaces, does that actually make you feel good? Do you feel like you're contributing? Is it what you envisioned activism and all this work to be? And if it's not, how does it look like?
I took good notes on this one, so I'm going to refer back. First of all, I would thank them, for their commitment and their work. The second advice I would give them would be to develop skills. Activism, there's actually a science behind activism. It's not all kitchen table stuff anymore. We've learned from what works and what doesn't work. So I would say build some skills in that area as well, because those skills will continue to, benefit you throughout your entire career and throughout your entire life. What are some of those skills? Coalition building, working with allies, developing relationships, understanding what communication looks like, helping people to understand how climate is important for all of us, and not just for certain people, that we all benefit from a positive climate. So these are just a small set of skills, and that's where I would start.
I guess I would, maybe this is a psychologist in me, I would hate to put so much pressure on students that they have to be activists and transform things. So my first thing is to affirm them as a whole and complete person who is worthy of being at the institution, that belongs here, to really kind of affirm them and build that up, and then to unpack what is your passion, and really begin to explore what their passion is, and then allowing them to focus where their energy might be. But first, I really want to work with who the person is and start there and build up, and then look, because I think sometimes people get overwhelmed about having this huge responsibility to make changes, and that may or may not be for everybody. And then those that do want to make change, I think that having energy in this place and that place and this place can be counterproductive to really exploring what energizes them, what moves them, what do they want to be remembered for, and then beginning to go from there.
All right, our last question. With those folks in mind, what would you share with all of us about how we should work with those students? Okay, you started us talking about it a little bit. But how should what do we need to do? How should we show up so that we're best able to support those students?
I think we need to be reflective. We really need to think about the work we need to do first. Young people, high school and in college, I feel like they can always smell a fake, right? So you cannot show up in a space and you haven't done your work. I think for me, that's been the most important process, is just continually checking myself and working on myself. Even in certain spaces, using language that I think is okay, that young people are like, nah, that's not cool anymore, you gotta do this, right? So just kind of always being in process, right? Because I don't want to tell them, and I think someone said it earlier, we can't tell young people to do work that we haven't done, right? So for me, a lot of it is just a continual, internal process of working on myself and reading and becoming more and more informed, especially about identities that are marginalized that I don't know about or haven't experienced, so that I can be a model.
I think part of that self-work is also really understanding where we're producing these systems. So a lot of times in my role, I'm asked, can you find me a student, who's the typical A student, dreamer narrative, undocumented person who can talk about this in this panel, because that's what we expect. And so obviously I push back and I'm like, what do you mean? What is the panel about? What is this for? And I will give that information to the student. If they choose to, then they will participate, but I'm not gonna ask them to do it on behalf of, because we need a student voice, because you said it in this context. And a lot of times I'm challenging myself and others to stop expecting free labor and time to honor the people's identity. So I find myself that I'm getting a lot of requests about research. Can you have this student fill out this research? Can you, this because they're undocumented, or we want to hear about their experience, or we want to invite them to this conversation. And a lot of the times I ask them, what lens are you coming to this research with? What are you going to use with the research afterwards? How will the student and the community have access to this research? And a lot of times I don't get a response back. And I also ask, are the students being compensated for their time? And that not always mean cash, I mean gift cards for the bookstore, for meal plans. And so I think so when you start to ask that, you're really starting to challenge and really advocating for students so that they're not accustomed to being taken advantage all the time.
I like this idea about modeling and the self-reflexivity. That really resonates with me. And I think the idea about modeling what it's like to fight for justice, but also live a balanced life, which is not, it's a hard thing to do, and I don't think I do that, but I do know that if I'm not doing that, then it's hard for the students to kind of do that, and people that I work with. And I'm just really reminded about Derek Bell's book, Ethical Ambition, and one of the things he was saying to live an ethical life is to live a little bit more balanced and to pay attention to your family and friends. And if you're not doing that, you're not living ethically. So I think part of this is modeling what that would look like. I think encouraging and supporting them to develop their own vision and what that would be, and mentoring, because I think our students don't have the same access to mentorship, and that should be a long-term investment in that person's life. And I also think a piece of it is somehow imparting this idea of radical hope. And what I mean by that is not just as simple things would get better, but I think that ties into all of the stuff we've been talking about here, is taking a look at our history of not only oppression but resistance, understanding our racial pride. This informs what is possible for us as individuals and collective, and to really cultivate that, I think, is important.
I would say, look at the values and the mission of this institution and your respective departments, and hold people accountable to that mission. And what does that mean? I mean, if we're talking about diversity, inclusion, how are those conceptualized? How are those rewarded? Most people who do this work do it because they have to. There's just no choice, I mean, if either I retreat and hide under a shell, or I do something about it. And if I don't do something about it, then I'm just going to be miserable. So, we do it because we have to do it, because really there's no option. For me, there's no option. But we do that at the risk of potentially putting ourselves in a position where we will not get tenure, we will get, we'll be poorly evaluated, and this and that. So question the institution and its values, and push that point, and change the system so that it rewards individuals for this work. Most of us want to do this work, and most of us do it anyway, but we're limited in our capacity because there's so many other responsibilities heaped upon us. So, I would say, continue that effort and continue to question whether or not institutions truly value this, and if they're going to put their money where their mouth is. I like the idea of free labor. No, we don't want no free labor, We don't want just to be paid for it. We want to be recognized for it, and we want to get credit for it.
I'm often reminded and challenged by the thought that when I meet a student for the first time, when they cross the threshold of my doorway, they're expecting to meet the associate director. And in my mind, I remind myself what they're hoping for is that accomplice, that co-conspirator, that co-resistor. And will I meet their expectation, or will I meet their hope? I think that's our challenge, is are we going to meet them where their hope is, or where their expectations might have been formed? Will you help me thank the panelists for their time? So our agenda allows for 15 or 20 minutes now of questions and answers. I know there's some microphones in some of the aisles here. If we could form lines, and if the panelists will indulge a few questions, we could take some questions from the audience or comments. reaction to what has been shared? Yes, please.
Hey, good evening. Thank you for the wonderful speech. Could have just mic dropped after you said schools are trauma sites. The end, no more. So thank you for that. So 2 questions. For those who work directly with students, one thing I'm noticing is there's a pushback now against the term students of color and persons of color. And I'm hearing a lot in the students that I work with that they're really not comfortable with that term anymore because of erasure, and it's kind of being just thrown around, almost like diversity. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that and how we can still speak to the individual differences. And is now students of color now becoming just another phrase for non-white, which is another issue in of itself. Secondly, how do you deal with burnout? Specifically, you talked about the limits that we do have as professionals of what we can do and also wanting to pay bills. And that frustration of trying to encourage our students to fight against a system that we see the limits and they're getting frustrated, they're bringing their frustrations to us. So how are you personally dealing with burnout with just your suggestions? So kind of 2 unrelated questions.
Is that all me?
No, that's for everyone. I was just thanking you for your speech.
So I'll take the burnout one first, I think. Again, just reiterating self-care. I know for me, that's been about setting up really strategic boundaries. So my therapist, actually, I can remember her language. She talked about boundaries and I can't think of the other word right now. She would be like, that's how you know you're not working on it. You won't tell. Yeah, boundaries and barriers. Boundaries and barriers. So she talked about how boundaries are movable, but barriers are not, right? And encouraging me to set those up. So I've just been doing small things like I have a Calendly. So you have to schedule time to meet with me, and you're only getting a certain link for certain time frames. So it's kind of forced me to take like phone calls and meetings only on certain days at certain times. And depending on who you are, you might get 15 minutes, you might get 30 minutes, but I get to sort of set that time. And that's been really important for me because otherwise I would just be picking up phone calls and kind of randomly attending to folks because people will take, right? And so you don't have anything else to give. I've also established just what I call a squad of folks, just community, that hold me accountable and check in on me. And we do like monthly self-care outings, and we schedule that in our calendar that we're gonna go out and do nothing, right? And just be with one another, be in community and laugh and have fun. And so just actually being strategic and intentional about setting up time to take care of myself and to be with family and friends and to experience joy and all of those good things, because otherwise life sort of like gets away from you. And next thing you know, it's a month and you haven't talked to anyone, you haven't sat down for dinner and had fun or anything like that. So I think it's about boundaries and barriers and being intentional about setting those things up.
Thank you.
I want to do all of it.
Anyone have a response to the terminology question?
Not necessarily on the terminology question, but I have heard more students say that they're part of the global majority. And that the way that they've described that is going back to like their historical, the context, and how they want to make sure that they're not minimized and that they're not looked down upon, because it does feel, they did share similar things in terms of like, it just seems like I am still being othered, I am still being thrown under the bus, I'm still, these programs are just for, or scholarships just for students of color, and it doesn't feel good. But I haven't had a larger conversation on that, but I will now.
I'll just say really briefly that I think that person of color conversation is also about anti-Blackness. So I know like a lot of Black students have said, we say people of color as if we're supposed to be in solidarity, but some folks of color are anti-Black. So they don't want to have the identifier of person of color. Let's go here.
So
good. I love this. Thank y'all so much. My name is Sechalela. I'm in the School of Social Work here. It's my first year as a master's student. And I'm learning, it's a big, big thing. And I love what was just said about the gold majority. I'm thinking of my family's from Tanzania, so I'm like, oh my goodness, Dr. Neville, I'm really, really excited about the program that you're doing. I'm wondering, as an educator, how do students change, and how have you changed through engaging with students after their time? Because I'm like, this thing is so America-centric, even our social work program, it's about here. So I have to remind myself that there's more than here and that we are here. So how do you and your students change through that exchange?
Okay, so particularly the study abroad in Tanzania. Oh, I'm glad you asked that question. We have to talk. But one of the things is that this year, which is the third summer that I've been doing this, we decided to do some collective autoethnographies to address this very question. And we've set up 3 groups and they're all African-American women. So 3 groups of them. One autoethnography is really dealing with this notion about global social responsibility and what that means and how that has been transformed through their travel to Tanzania. And it was really hard to get them to think about not what's going on in Tanzania, but how they have been transformed from what they're experiencing. They keep one, even as African American, othering Tanzania as opposed to saying what they've learned. And an outgrowth of that, they established the Association of Black Travelers. We're bringing people out. We're doing a fundraiser. Anybody want to contribute? I'm taking money to work on, we've kind of working with a school, a primary school there, and they told us that they want to get connected to the National Electricity Grill. So please see me if you're interested in supporting Kisuju Pwani Primary School. So another one deals with their identities and how their understanding about being a Black woman has changed through that. And another one is dealing with spirituality and this notion. So a lot of that is incorporating this reflexivity piece into it. So that's just a little bit. I can go on and on and on. But
we will. Thank you so much.
Hello. I'm Yatisha Robinson, and I teach in the School of Social Work where Sechalela is. Very happy to be here. I was proud to see a lot of folks from social work here today, too. So teaching in the School of Social Work,